Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So I've seen this quote from Hayden Christensen going pretty viral around the internet today, which is somewhat surprising given that the interview is almost 2 months old now, but it certainly wasn't on my radar, and I guess that's probably because the publishing journal is Esquire Middle East. Prequel fans, you'll love this interview because Hayden goes really deep into becoming Darth Vader, his love of Star Wars, and more. There are a ton of highlights, including the fact that he wants to continue playing the character for many years. But the aforementioned viral bit of the interview was when Hayden was asked, did you follow Clone Wars all those years? He responded by saying, of course, yeah, I love Clone Wars. I think what Dave Filoni did with the Clone Wars and Rebels are brilliant. I'm indebted to Dave Filoni because I think he helped the character of Anakin a lot. I think he fleshed out the character and also furthered our understanding of Anakin's relationship with the Jedi Council and the mistrust that he harbored. Going on to say it actually influenced his performance in Kenobi and that he gained a lot from the character's portrayal in the Clone Wars. Now, I thought this was just an interesting reflection point that I wanted to use as a springboard for discussion. Not only my thoughts, but I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about this down in the comments. But I remember way back in 2005 going to see Revenge of the Sith the night it came out, and there wasn't a whole lot that was unknown about the movie. Not only did the last trailer for Revenge of the Sith basically show everything, including some of the final fights, but there wasn't a lot of mystery in the story. You knew it was going to be a dramatic fall of Anakin Skywalker. You knew something bad was going to happen to the Jedi Order. You knew that Luke and Leia's mom probably wasn't going to be around by the end of the movie. It was really the specifics and, of course, the spectacle of it all that brought people there on opening night. And arguably one of the weakest parts of Episode 3 is Anakin's fall. His transformation to the dark side is definitely somewhat sudden. And growing up, I remember my friends, especially those who didn't love Star Wars to the degree that I did, the sort of fervent defending pro Star Wars guy that I was, laughing at it and finding it a bit silly how Anakin goes from trying to be the good guy to just blatantly killing children. Now, as an adult, I think there is a bit more nuance in that scene, but undoubtedly the Clone Wars added a lot to Anakin's fall. A big part of that, I think, is the character of Ahsoka. We see how she's mistreated by the Jedi Order. We see how the loss of Ahsoka really pains Anakin himself. That's something I think that was further expanded on by other works like the Clone Wars Season 7, which obviously came out after the original run. But I mean, we also see through not only the Clone Wars, but also the original Clone Wars animation, sort of the upcoming specter of Anakin's dark side, and also little hints of evil peeking through. All of this, I think, does a really good job of fleshing out Anakin's fall and also the relationship, maybe even more importantly, between Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And in hindsight, I think that the movies really benefit from that. Moving on to Kenobi, I feel like although that show had some major issues, there were parts that really solidified Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader for me. Most importantly, the scene where Darth Vader has his mask partially destroyed and you see Anakin's face underneath, that really made something click for me. Like, obviously, logically, I know that guy in the suit is the same guy with the floofy hair that I loved in Episode 3, but it's really hard to make that connection sometime, and I felt like exposing the face, as Kenobi did, as Star Wars Rebels did, but especially Kenobi, given the use of Hayden Christensen, was a really great way to make the legacy media better without devaluing it or just adding too much nonsense storylines. Obviously, Rebels continues this. One of my favorite scenes in that show is in, I think it's episode 2 or 3 of season 2, when Ahsoka discovers that Anakin's still alive. There's just so much development for the characters happening that it makes, as I said, everything better. You do run the risk of throwing Darth Vader into too many things, and I think that can be a very real problem, but it's one they've done at least a decent job of sort of walking around. Just generally, I do think that the Clone Wars is one of the best things that happened for the prequel trilogy era. And I'm saying this as somebody, keep in mind, who grew up watching Star Wars in the late 90s, early 2000s. I was born in 1992. I was pretty much the audience for the prequel trilogy, and I loved them. Growing up, I also dismissed the Clone Wars, something that I eventually rectified and realized what a massive piece of great Star Wars media I was missing. But I've got to say, it does make me think more about the sequel trilogy. Obviously, the sequel trilogy has some major issues. I've said that I generally like most of the characters, characters. Even when the characters have issues, I find that the actors and actresses portraying them are generally pretty good. And I do wonder whether there's some space for an animated show to come in and somewhat improve the world building, the background stuff, basically everything leading up to, during, and obviously eventually after episodes 7 through 9. Star Wars Resistance does exist, but it doesn't do that. It's more of its self-contained story. We do get some stuff, at least from what I've heard, I haven't watched the entire show, about the formation of the First Order, but it's not a Rebels and it's not a Clone Wars. We already do arguably see Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau attempting to do some of this with The Mandalorian. This has been a thing that's been argued by some fans ever since it was clear that cloning would become a part of season 1. I definitely didn't fully agree with that. I always felt like even the clone tanks were meant to be more about Moff Gideon than some eventual Snoke or Palpatine reveal, and I think I was vindicated in that. But we see, especially towards the end of season 3, that yeah, they are going to start doing, I think, some heavy world building, and hopefully, especially with the Ahsoka show, they can try to fix some of the mess that is the world building in the post-Endor era. It was hurt early on by books like Star Wars Aftermath, where ideally your supplemental material helps fill in issues or missing things from the movies, not create a whole set of other problems. Anyway, I don't want to read too much into, Hayden Christensen's lip service here. It's very easy for him to say something nice about Dave Filoni, but I'm also glad that the Clone Wars is getting some real mainstream recognition. I'm glad people have realized that it's helped make the prequel trilogy in hindsight better, even if you're someone like me who was always in love with it. I also personally believe that Star Wars Rebels is perhaps the most underrated piece of Star Wars media. I think it tells such a phenomenally compelling story that is sometimes hampered by animation, bits made for kids, when the themes, the way it's animated, the characters, it all feels to me quintessentially George Lucas and quintessentially Star Wars. I hope that Ahsoka, which is essentially a Rebels sequel series, ends up driving people back to that show as Kenobi undoubtedly did with the Clone Wars, and I hope people realize as well the impact that it had on making everything else really a little bit better. The final thing I want to end on is Hayden Christensen said he's proud of the work they did and that episode 3 in particular is brilliant and what George Lucas did holds up today. I completely agree, especially in terms of episode 3. Episode 3 is pure drama. It's spectacle. It's like an opera. Yes, sometimes the world building, sometimes the nuance falls a bit flat, but the pure emotional journey that film offers is really perhaps unparalleled in the saga. You're seeing an epic at its tipping point, thousands of generations coming to an end in an instant and something completely new emerging. It's just so phenomenally interesting, and the Clone Wars, I think, helps fix some of the issues that telling a story on such a grand scale naturally sees emerge. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours down below.